You wake up and within 60 seconds the calculation begins. Not the big ones. The small ones. How much of yourself to give to this conversation? How much effort to pour into this project? How much care to invest in this person? And every time, you hold a little back. A reserve. A safety net. You tell yourself it's wisdom. You tell yourself it's self-protection. But here's what nobody tells you, the half measure is exactly what's eating you alive. You sacrifice the result and you sacrifice the integrity of having truly tried. You lose on both ends. And you walk around wondering why nothing ever feels complete, why nothing ever feels fully yours. Here is the idea I want you to sit with: real self-protection isn't holding back. It's giving everything to what you control and nothing to what you don't. That's it. That's the whole practice. And it changes everything. Most people hear that and think it's a contradiction. Give everything and lose nothing? That sounds like a fortune cookie, not a philosophy. But the Stoics didn't deal in fortune cookies. They dealt in the brutal mechanics of how a human mind collapses under pressure and how to keep it from collapsing. And what they figured out, tested in exile and war and political annihilation, is that the pain you fear from loss doesn't come from giving too much. It comes from giving too much to the wrong thing. It comes from investing your emotional capital in outcomes you never controlled in the first place. Think about what you actually do when you hold back. You have a conversation you need to have. A hard one. Maybe with someone you love. And you rehearse it. You water it down. You find the softer version, the version that won't provoke, won't risk, won't expose the full weight of what you feel. And you deliver maybe 60% of what's true. And the conversation goes fine. Nothing explodes. And you walk away feeling hollow. Because you know you didn't say what needed saying. You protected yourself from their reaction and you abandoned yourself in the process. That's what holding back does. It doesn't protect you. It amputates you. Or maybe it's not a conversation. Maybe it's a project. A business. A creative pursuit. Something you say you care about. But you don't go all in. You keep one foot out the door because what if it fails? What if you give it everything and it doesn't work? So you give it 70%. 80 on a good day. And it doesn't work. Or it works just enough to frustrate you. And you tell yourself, well, at least I didn't fully commit. At least I didn't look like a fool. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud: you still failed. You just failed without the dignity of having tried completely. You got the worst of both worlds. The sting of the loss without the self-respect that comes from knowing you held nothing back. Epictetus understood this at a level most people never reach. He was born a slave. He was crippled. He was eventually exiled. He had every reason to hold back from life, to guard himself, to never fully commit to anything because the world had already shown him it would take everything. And yet his central teaching, the thing he returned to again and again, was the opposite of self-protection. He said, commit fully. Throw yourself into the action with everything you have. But append one silent phrase to every intention. Fate permitting. That's the reserve clause. That's the whole mechanism. You set out to do something and you say to yourself, silently, internally, I will do this fully, completely, with everything I have. If nothing prevents me. That last part isn't a hedge. It isn't a half measure. It isn't the same thing as holding back. It's a radical act of clarity. Because what it says is, I control the effort. I control the integrity. I control the intention. I do not control the outcome. And I refuse to confuse the two. Most people confuse the two constantly. They merge effort and outcome into one tangled mess. So when the outcome fails, they feel like they failed. When the result isn't what they wanted, they feel like they weren't enough. They've tied their worth to things they never controlled, and then they're surprised when their worth feels unstable. The reserve clause cuts that knot. It says, I will give 100% of myself to the action. And I will give 0% of myself to the result. Not because the result doesn't matter. It matters. But because it doesn't belong to me. It never did. Marcus Aurelius carried this idea through 19 years as Emperor of Rome. 19 years of plague, war, betrayal, political treachery, the slow disintegration of everything he built. And what did he tell himself? Complete the action. That's your job. Whether it lands, whether it succeeds, whether anyone notices, whether anyone cares. That's not yours. Complete the action. Do it as it deserves to be done. With full attention. With full effort. And then let go. He didn't say do it halfway so it hurts less when it fails. He didn't say protect yourself by caring less. He said the opposite. Do the work. All of it. The work itself is the metric. The work itself is the only thing that belongs to you. Everything else is weather. Think about what that means in practice. You have a job interview. You prepare. You study the company. You refine your answers. You show up early. You give the best version of yourself. And then they hire someone else. Most people in that moment feel destroyed. They feel like they failed. They replay every answer, second-guess every moment, spiral into self-doubt. Because they gave their effort and they expected a return. They invested in the outcome. And the outcome didn't cooperate. But if you'd been practicing the reserve clause, the experience would be completely different. You would have prepared exactly as hard. Shown up exactly as sharp. Given exactly as much. And when they said no, you would feel something. Disappointment, sure. You're human. But underneath the disappointment, there would be something solid. Something that doesn't collapse. Because you know you did what was yours to do. You gave everything to the action. The verdict was never yours. And so the verdict can't touch you. Not really. Not at the level where your self-respect lives. That's what giving everything and losing nothing actually means. It doesn't mean you never feel disappointment. It means disappointment doesn't corrode you. It passes through you like weather through a well-built house. The walls hold. The foundation holds. Because the foundation isn't built on outcomes. It's built on effort. On integrity. On the knowledge that you showed up completely. Seneca used the example of an athlete. Think about what a competitor does. They train for months. They discipline their body. They study their opponents. They pour everything into the preparation. And then they step into the arena and they give everything to the contest. Every ounce of strength. Every bit of strategy. They hold nothing back. And then the judges render a verdict. And the athlete accepts it. Not with indifference. With composure. Because they know something the crowd doesn't, the contest was theirs. The verdict was never theirs. They gave everything to what they controlled and they let go of what they didn't. Now here's the part that's going to feel uncomfortable. Most people don't live like this. Most people live in a gray zone. They give enough to feel like they're trying but not enough to feel exposed. They keep one hand on the door. They hedge. And the cost of that hedging is enormous. It's the reason you still don't feel whole. It's the reason you still don't feel like yourself. Because you can't feel whole when you're constantly withholding parts of yourself from your own life. You can't feel like yourself when you're always negotiating how much of yourself to risk. The irony is brutal. You hold back because you're afraid of being hurt. But the holding back is the hurt. The thing you're doing to protect yourself is the very thing that's making you feel incomplete. You're protecting yourself into a smaller and smaller version of who you are. And here's the deeper layer. When you hold back, you're not actually protecting yourself from pain. You're protecting yourself from the kind of pain that has a clean shape. The pain of having tried fully and failed is sharp. It's clean. It heals. It leaves a scar that says I was here and I gave everything. The pain of holding back is dull. It's chronic. It doesn't heal because there's nothing to heal from. You didn't fail at anything. You just didn't show up. And that ache, that low-grade hum of something unfinished, follows you everywhere. It's the pain of self-abandonment. And it's worse than any single failure could ever be. So let me make this concrete. Because Stoicism isn't about feeling inspired. It's about changing how you operate. Here's the daily practice. First, before any meaningful action, you make a silent commitment to the effort. Not to the outcome. To the effort. You say to yourself, I will give everything to this. I will hold nothing back. If nothing prevents me. That phrase, fate permitting, isn't a prayer. It's a boundary. It draws a line between what's yours and what isn't. Your effort is yours. The result is not. You commit to one. You release the other. Second. When the outcome arrives, whether it's what you wanted or not, you do not merge your identity with it. You don't say I succeeded or I failed. You say I acted. The action was mine. The outcome was the world's. And you move on. Not with coldness. With clarity. There's a difference. Coldness is a wall. Clarity is a window. You see the outcome clearly. You feel it. You learn from it. But you don't absorb it as a verdict on your worth. Third. You audit your attachments. Regularly. Sit down and ask yourself, where am I investing emotional energy in things I don't control? Where have I tied my sense of self to someone else's approval, to a specific result, to a timeline I didn't set? And you untie those knots. One by one. Not by caring less. By caring more precisely. By redirecting that energy back into the only thing that belongs to you. The action. The effort. The integrity of how you show up. Most people hear detachment and think it means not caring. That's not what this is. This is caring with precision. Caring about the right things in the right proportion. Caring so much about your own integrity that you refuse to let external outcomes dictate your internal state. That's not coldness. That's the warmest, most fierce form of self-respect there is. And here's the paradox that makes this work. When you stop clinging to outcomes, you become more effective. Not less. More. Because the energy you were spending on anxiety about the result gets redirected into the action itself. You're not splitting your attention between doing the thing and worrying about whether the thing will work. You're doing the thing. Fully. And that fullness makes you sharper, more present, more powerful. Think about the last time you performed well at something. Really well. The flow state. The zone. What was present? Effort. Presence. Full commitment to the moment. What was absent? Worry about the outcome. You weren't thinking about whether it would work. You were just doing it. That's the reserve clause in action. That's what it produces. Not detachment from life. Full immersion in life. With a steady hand on the boundary between what's yours and what isn't. Now I want you to think about the relationships in your life. Because this is where holding back does the most damage. How many times have you held back from telling someone how you really feel? Not a confession. Not a dramatic declaration. Just the truth. I appreciate you. I was wrong. I'm scared. I love you. And you didn't say it. Because what if they don't respond the way you need them to? What if it gets awkward? What if it changes things? So you carry it. The unsaid thing. And it weighs on you. Not because it's heavy but because it's incomplete. It's a half measure. You felt something fully and you expressed it partially. And that gap between what you felt and what you expressed is where the pain lives. The reserve clause says, say it. Fully. Without hedging. Without softening. Without rehearsing the safer version. Say what's true. Give everything to the expression. And then let go of what comes back. Because their response is not yours. It never was. You control the honesty. You control the courage. You control the vulnerability. You do not control what they do with it. And here's what happens when you live this way. Something shifts. Not overnight. Not in a dramatic epiphany. Slowly. Quietly. You start to feel more like yourself. Because you're no longer editing yourself for safety. You're no longer performing a diminished version of who you are. You're showing up. Completely. And even when things don't go your way, even when the outcome stings, there's something underneath that doesn't break. A floor. A foundation. The knowledge that you were here. Fully. That you didn't flinch. That you gave everything to what was yours to give and you let go of what wasn't. That foundation is what most people are looking for when they talk about self-worth. They think self-worth is something you build by getting external validation. By achieving things. By being liked. But self-worth built on external outcomes is a house on a fault line. It shakes with every result. It crumbles with every rejection. Real self-worth, the kind that holds, is built differently. It's built by showing up completely for what you control and releasing what you don't. Over and over. Until it becomes who you are. Not a practice you do. A person you are. Carl Jung had a phrase for this kind of integration. He talked about the person who carries their own weight. Not someone who denies difficulty. Not someone who pretends pain doesn't exist. Someone who carries it. Fully. Without asking the world to carry it for them. That's what the reserve clause produces. A person who carries their own weight. Who gives everything to the effort and carries the weight of the outcome without being crushed by it. Because here's the thing about outcomes. They're not just unpredictable. They're indifferent. The universe doesn't owe you a return on your effort. It doesn't work that way. And the sooner you stop expecting it to, the sooner you stop being devastated when it doesn't, the more freely you can act. The more fully you can commit. Because you're no longer acting under the tyranny of expected returns. You're acting because the action is right. Because the effort is yours. Because showing up completely is who you've decided to be, regardless of what the world does with it. Let me say that again because it matters. You act because the action is right. Not because it will work. Not because you'll get something back. Not because the outcome will justify the effort. You act because the action is right. And that is the most powerful reason to do anything. Because it's the one reason the world can't take from you. The world can take your reward. The world can take your recognition. The world can take the result you worked for and hand it to someone else. The world can do all of that, and it does, regularly, to everyone, without apology. But the world cannot take the fact that you showed up. That you gave everything. That you did what was yours to do. That belongs to you. Permanently. Unshakably. And that's what giving everything and losing nothing means. It doesn't mean you never lose outcomes. You will. Often. It means you never lose yourself. Because you've placed yourself, your identity, your worth, in the one place where it can't be touched. The integrity of your own effort. Now I want you to think about your life as it is right now. Not the idealized version. The real one. Where are you holding back? Where are you giving 70% because 80 feels too exposed and 100 feels impossible? Where are you keeping one foot out the door? Is it in your work? Your relationships? Your health? Your creative life? Your spiritual life? Where have you convinced yourself that the half measure is the smart play? And I want you to ask yourself one question. Has it protected you? Really? Has holding back kept you safe? Or has it just kept you small? Has it prevented pain, or has it just replaced the sharp pain of failure with the dull ache of incompletion? Be honest. Because the answer matters. Because if the half measure actually worked, I'd tell you to keep using it. But it doesn't. It never has. It gives you the illusion of safety while slowly hollowing you out. And one day you look around and realize you don't recognize yourself. You've edited yourself down to a version that fits inside a small, safe container. And the container isn't even protecting you from anything real. It's protecting you from the fear of something that might not even happen. The reserve clause is the antidote. Not because it eliminates risk. It doesn't. You still act. You still commit. You still expose yourself. You still feel the vulnerability of having tried. The reserve clause doesn't remove the sting of effort. It removes the devastation of misplaced attachment. It lets you feel the sting without being destroyed by it. It lets you fail without failing at yourself. And that distinction is everything. Failing at a task is manageable. Failing at yourself is not. The reserve clause ensures that even when the task fails, you don't. Because you didn't define success as the outcome. You define success as the completeness of your effort. And that completeness is always available to you. Always. Regardless of circumstances. Regardless of what the world does. You can always choose to show up fully. That choice is the one thing that is absolutely, unconditionally yours. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow. Today. Pick one thing. One area where you've been holding back. One conversation you've been diluting. One project you've been hedging. One relationship where you've been keeping the door cracked. And give everything. Not to the outcome. To the action. Say the thing you've been softening. Do the work you've been postponing. Show up with the full weight of who you are. And then, silently, append the phrase. Fate permitting. I give everything to this. And I release the result. Feel what that's like. Feel the difference between holding back and letting go. Holding back is contraction. It's a fist closing around something it's afraid to lose. Letting go is expansion. It's an open hand. And the open hand can receive. Can act. Can move. The closed fist can only grip. And eventually, it tires. The Stoics weren't philosophers in armchairs. They were people under pressure who found a way to stay whole in a world that was trying to break them. Epictetus was a slave who became free not because his circumstances changed but because his relationship to circumstances changed. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who could have clung to every outcome, who could have tied his identity to every victory and every defeat, and instead he wrote himself reminders, daily, to complete the action and let the rest go. Seneca was a man who advised emperors and was eventually ordered to kill himself by one, and in his final moments, he embodied the thing he'd been teaching his whole life. The effort is mine. The outcome is not. I give everything to what I control. I release what I don't. These weren't abstract teachings. They were survival mechanisms. Refined under real pressure. Tested against real loss. And they work. Not because they're ancient or because they're philosophical. Because they're mechanically correct. They describe the actual structure of human experience. There are things you control and things you don't. And your peace, your power, your integrity, your self-respect, all of it depends on one thing. Knowing the difference. And acting on it. So let me bring you back to where we started. You wake up. The calculation begins. How much to give? How much to hold? And today, I want you to make a different calculation. Not how much can I safely risk, but what is actually mine to give. And then give all of it. Every time. Not because it will work. Not because you'll be rewarded. Not because the universe is fair. Because it isn't always fair. But because the act of giving fully is the one thing that makes you whole. And wholeness isn't something the world can give you. It's something you build. Action by action. Choice by choice. By showing up completely for what's yours and releasing what isn't. You hold back because you think caring less is what protects you. But the half measure is what's eating you alive. And the cure isn't to care less. It's to care more precisely. To pour everything into what you control and nothing into what you don't. That's not a paradox. That's a practice. And it's the only practice that lets you give everything and lose nothing. Because when you give everything to the effort and nothing to the outcome, you can never be robbed. The world can withhold results. It cannot withhold your integrity. It can deny you the outcome. It cannot deny you the fact that you showed up. Fully. Completely. Without flinching. And that, in the end, is all that was ever yours to protect. Give everything. Hold nothing back. And let the outcome belong to the world. Stay whole.